Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Integrate Online, presented by the West Virginia University Reed College of Media, which offers renowned online master's degrees programs in marketing communications. So thanks again for joining us, everyone. I'm Tod Meisner, first off, brand manager at AFLAC, and I'm also an adjunct instructor for the Reed College of Media. Hopefully y'all are in the right spot. Today, we are going to be discussing personal branding. Specifically personal branding tips to succeed in your career. With us today is Professor of Marketing at William & Mary, Dr. Dawn Edmiston. Thanks for joining us. And marketing instructor at the University of Florida, Brianne Fleming.
Hi, everyone.
Yeah, jump in. Some quick housekeeping reminders. Please be sure to keep your mics muted for the session. You can send in questions to the chat feature. There's a lot of folks online. I already see that there's 13 questions in the chat queue. We will do our best to either answer those during this chat. We may do it at the end because we have a lot of ground to cover. So bear with us. I'll try to be monitoring the chat as we're going through the discussion here. If we do not get to your question, never fear. We will take a look at these afterwards. We'll try to answer these questions, and a follow-up may come from Stephanie. Seeing a lot of just pleasantries and saying where you're from. So again, thanks y'all for joining us. We'll do our best to get to the questions in the chat queue, but we have our own questions we're going to get to today. So with that, stay on mute. We'll do our best to monitor the chat, and we are going to go ahead and jump in as we are 3 past the hour. So Dawn and Brianne, once again, thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
We are so glad to be here.
Awesome. So I'm going to start with a 2-part question. I say it will be hard hitting, but I think it's very important to ground us in why we're here today. So first, let's start off with one, what is a personal brand? And then the second part, not to put you both on the spot, but I think you're very well prepared. How would each of you describe your personal brand to someone else? So Brianne, I'll kick it to you first, and then we'll follow up with Dawn. So once again, what is a personal brand? And then how would you describe your personal brand to someone else?
Yeah, happy to take that. So for me, a personal brand is really an extension of who you are, primarily online. We kind of build it up in our heads to be this formal presentation of who we are, but it's really not. It's just an extension of who you are in your real life, in your career, amongst friends, family, coworkers, but portraying that online as well, on social media and on your own website, perhaps. So it's really just an extension of who you already are. As far as my personal brand, I like to think that it's true to me. Just for some background, I like to teach people about marketing, but through the lens of something that I love and have always loved, which is pop culture. So, particularly late 90s, early 2000s pop culture. You'll notice the pop art behind me. I have a podcast called Making the Brand where we'll take lessons from music or sports and movies, anything in pop culture, and derive marketing lessons from them. So, for instance, we dropped an episode today about marketing lessons from Harry Potter. So, fun things like that. I just like to talk about things that I've naturally grown up with and loved, and trending topics in culture, but also adding marketing to the mix because I love that as well.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Dawn, on to you. So once again, what is personal brand? And then how would you describe your personal brand?
I would define a personal brand as a strategic and intentional process that involves understanding and defining your value proposition to others. So Jeff Bezos, CEO of that little known organization, Amazon, he once said that your personal brand is what people say about you when you walk out of the room. So I like to think that what you would say about me when I walked out of the room is that my personal brand promise is to teach people how to discover and share their value with others.
Awesome. I love that second point. I think in this day and age, it's easier more than ever to share those thoughts and to share that voice and to share that expertise, good and bad. So I think when it comes to branding, you have to be really intentional and really careful in crafting that. Back to your point from Jeff Bezos, it's what people say when you're not around. Ultimately, I try to tell my students a lot, if we get into this branding topic, people are going to form those opinions of you, and they may control it just as much as you do. So the control was there for us to own it, but boy, if you don't own it, or if you don't use your channels appropriately, the general masses are going to define it for you.
Yes,
so you must be cognizant.
I often share with my students something similar. Your brand will be implicitly developed for you, whether or not you decide to explicitly develop it for you. It's important to recall that.
Yeah, any thoughts on that, Brianne, just kind of before we move on to that next section, as far as other people forming those opinions?
Right. Yeah. I mean, relating it back to pop culture, I talk about this a lot, how personal branding has given now celebrities a chance to own the narrative. In the days of tabloid culture, the news or whoever could say whatever they wanted about you, and you didn't have a say in controlling that narrative. But whether it's celebrities or us as individuals, we now can set the record straight and use our voices to control the narrative and the brand that we truly want to portray. So absolutely, I wholeheartedly agree with that.
Awesome. So getting a little more specific now, let's move into branding for marketing practitioners, marketing and communications professionals, students, what have you. I'll start with you again, Brianne. Why is a personal brand important for marketing communicators, marketing practitioners in 2021 and beyond?
Really, I think that I don't want to say you're invisible if you don't have a personal brand, but there are just so many opportunities that are uncovered by being present online. And I always say people think that having a personal brand makes you promotional and like all you do is talk about yourself and it's all about, oh, look at me and my personal brand. But it's not making you promotional. It's making you present, seen, heard, to the point where opportunities can fall into play. I don't even think I would be here having this conversation with you if I didn't have an online presence or a personal brand of some sort. And for marketing professionals specifically, there is such a community out there, one that I've been happy to be a part of, especially on Twitter. But there's so much to learn, and there are so many other professionals we can learn from. So rather than just passively consuming knowledge and information from people you may admire, you also have, no matter where you are in your career, have the potential to contribute to those conversations and contribute thought-provoking things from just your own perspective, no matter where you are in your career. So you can jump into those conversations with Jeff Bezos on Twitter, with anyone. You don't have to be intimidated. We all can learn from each other.
Good stuff, Dawn. Over to you for that same question.
And to build upon Brianne's comments relative to defining your value and how you can use your personal brand as an opportunity to connect with others, I definitely understand the concerns that we have about marketing and the commercialization of marketing. And even Oprah at one point said, "I am not a product," until she realized that she is one of the world's most powerful brands. And so now she has that mindset as well. And she understands that when a product or service is associated with her name, that is going to signal a certain value to others. And that's really what your personal brand does. It's a signal. It's a signal of the value that you are able to contribute to others. And that's why it's so important to dedicate time and effort to developing your brand. And again, we are thrilled. I cannot believe that there are 200 of you with us. It's just wonderful. And I hope that I have 200 new LinkedIn connections after this event. Although, as we were briefly discussing prior to opening this session, please be certain that when you connect with us, let us know that you attended this event, because developing your personal brand, it's not always about the quantity of contacts that you have, but the quality of contacts. So we want to know that you engage with us today, and we would love to engage with you as well across social media channels.
Thanks for that. And I like your point there about, signals and kind of sending the right signals and recognizing, who you are and what value you bring. This is a question from the chat. It's not so much a question, it's a question from them, but I think it's a comment that just come up from us. And the question was, do you think personal branding could serve as a self-development tool, like an extension of self-development efforts? That simple answer is yes. But I will let each of you expound on that a little bit. But, you know, for me, those have always gone hand in hand. In the last 5 years, as I've been really intentional about myself and my presence and what I want to do with my career, those have come along with learning more about myself and EQ and self-development and taking courses, whether it's Myers-Briggs or whether it's, you know, the what else is out there, DISC, and things to learn about how you interact with friends, how you interact with people at the office. Maybe this is what our office is now, is virtual. But yes, I think they go hand in hand. But I'll kick it back to you guys. You know, how is it that self-development tool? How do they play well together?
Yeah, I think that that's such a lovely and creative concept. But I think it's also so important to think about that as you're developing your own brand. That's your internal perspective. But a personal brand has two perspectives, the internal and the external. And you need to recognize the value of both of those perspectives. So in addition to using a personal brand as a self-development opportunity, you also need to engage with external audiences. You also need to think about who is going to value the products or services that I am delivering. And you need to ask those questions. So Tod just alluded to, you know, the individuals with whom he works, the clients with whom he works. It's important to get their feedback too, because how you may be perceiving your personal brand may be very different from how others perceive your personal brand.
Absolutely. And to add on that, just personally, I've felt that in my journey, you know, it really does call for you to develop yourself and ask yourself, what do I want to be known for? I always joke that just sitting down and trying to write my bio and my about me on my website, that could be one of the hardest exercises, to just write about yourself and really articulate who you are and the things that you want to be known for. But it challenges you to think about what you want in the future and just understand more of who you are and who you want to be. So if you haven't done it, start writing that about page for your website and you'll really learn a lot about yourself.
And Brianne, I think it's also important, as you just alluded to be forward thinking. So for example, when you're on LinkedIn, you don't necessarily need to reflect upon every past experience that you might have. Think about what you want to do moving forward and think about what you've gained from those experiences that will allow you to better position yourselves and your personal brand moving forward. So think about the language. As Brianne said, I wholeheartedly agree. Developing an about narrative for your LinkedIn profile or a compelling resume can be very difficult tasks. And I do this for a living, and it's very difficult for me. But think about where you want to be. Look at a position description. I call it an aspirational opportunity, where you want to be and what language they're using in that position description. And then ensure that you are using those keywords to describe yourself, to describe your personal brand.
Awesome points. And I'm going to go back to kind of what Brianne touched on with the about. And then the two sides of the coin. You define kind of what your brand is, but so does someone else. My about section transformed when in our internal newsletter, it was the month of my birthday. And so the internal AFLAC team newsletter is, hey, we're going to celebrate birthdays. Fill out this questionnaire. And then someone else did the write-up on the questions that I answered. And I was like, their words about me sound way better than what I could say about myself. And I recrafted that. And if you visit my LinkedIn, the about section, and it's the about section on my website, that was crafted by Christian, who works as a copywriter at AFLAC. He took info I gave him, and I was like, you made me sound better than I ever could. So if you're stumped on the about portion, work on it yourself, but ask your friend, your colleague, your significant other, someone close to you, and say, hey, here's a list of things that are me. What's your story about me? And that's a good exercise to maybe help you get going. Because again, I could have never said what my about section does in a way that Christian said it about me.
Yeah. And I'm so glad you mentioned story, because that's one of my biggest tips and just epiphanies in writing my own about me. Is I used to write it just as a paragraph version of my resume, really. I would say, oh, I graduated from here and I've worked at this place and that place for X number of years and I specialize in this. And I said to myself, this isn't adding personality at all. your about should really complement whatever it is on your resume and give people context of who you are on a personal level and adding that personality. So instead of just rattling off accolades or positions and things that you had, ask yourself, what is a story about me that really reflects on who I am or explains why I am the way that I am, or things that I love?
Yes, we've certainly discussed what a personal brand should be, but there are a few things that it should not be. And it should not be a list of credentials. It should not be a list of titles or certifications. It should be the value that you gained from those experiences and how you can share that value with others.
Well said.
Yeah, totally well said. And we're going to kind of build on that again, but we started with the about, and the next question here is, where do you start? There's probably a lot of people on here who are saying, what's my starting point? Is it the about? Is it my credentials? It doesn't need to be a list like Dawn just alluded to. So I'll throw it to Brianne first. What would you tell people to focus on as the starting point to identifying their personal brand?
Take a moment to reflect. I would just jump into things and think, okay, I know who I am. I'm going to include my titles and credentials and things in here. And there we go. That's my about me. But I didn't have a light bulb moment until I really reflected on who I am and the things that I love. But one thing I really want to recommend is reflect back on your childhood, because at least for me personally, as I started working and getting into the working world, I lost sight of the things that I grew up loving or the reasons that I got into this field. There were things that I enjoyed and aspects of the industry that I clung to, but I kind of lost my way as I got into the corporate world, and I forgot what I was passionate about. So I can bet we all have a personal story, either from our childhood or maybe our adolescence or a little later, that really signals why we are the way that we are. Whether it was, the first moment that you knew you wanted to get into marketing, or you knew you wanted to get into your field. For instance, on my about page, I talk about growing up, how every weekend I would go to the mall and I would buy a Teeny Bopper magazine, a Tiger Beat, a Teen Beat, because that's what I grew up loving. And I would just pour over the pages and look at the copywriting, the layouts, the photography, the ads. And that's when I knew I wanted to be a part of this field and do something creative. So I imagine we all have a story like that will inform everything else you do in the future with your brand.
And I actually share a childhood story as well on my perfect pitch video. And I do need to comment, I see that my mom is on the list of participants. So I am thrilled that she's here, and she can attest to the fact that when I was a little girl, I would make up price tags and place them on my sister's toys, of course, and sell them to my imaginary friends. So I think I was born to be a marketer at a very young age. And although that's not something I necessarily share in my narrative of LinkedIn, it is how I started my LinkedIn. It is how I started my perfect pitch video, which you can also watch through my LinkedIn profile if you're interested.
And that's so much more endearing than just reading off your marketing credentials or your background. It just kind of gives people the warm and fuzzies to think about their own childhood and to understand you better through your own personal story. So it's, I think, more fun to write, but it's also more fun to read for whoever you're presenting yourself to.
And being able to develop an authentic self. One of the reasons why I teach the development of perfect pitch videos in my classes is because this is so much more dynamic than a one-dimensional resume. And so I know I'm proud to teach at the College of William and Mary, but we are in Williamsburg, Virginia, not Williamsburg, New York, near New York City. And so there are not many folks or recruiters that may be as apt to visit us in Williamsburg, Virginia, as there would be in New York City or Washington, D.C. But I know if our students can just create 60 seconds, a narrative, a story for 60 seconds about themselves, and use those videos, which they've embedded in their LinkedIn profiles, to connect with recruiters and connect with one another, that's just a really powerful networking tool, a really powerful professional development tool as well.
Yeah, I mean, your resume is typically just an 8.5 by 11 PDF, but your personal brand, when you extend it other places online, it really has no bounds. There is no limit to where you can be seen and where you can publish and who can see your work.
And we should share as well, for those of you who are seeking new career opportunities, recruiters, whether or not they tell you that they are doing so, I promise you that they are checking your social media channels. And I promise you, especially if you're looking for a career in marketing, that they're looking at your LinkedIn profile. The reason, and I'm certain that Brianne can attest to this as well, Brianne's created this really, Brianne before you've even met her, through her professional profile and her personal brand. And when we're thinking about organizations want to hire individuals who will make their brands look good. They want you to be a brand advocate. They want you to use your personal brand as well as your professional brand to support them, represent them, and their efforts.
Love all of those anecdotes. Want to still kind of stick to this point, getting back to the starting point, and also want to mention the childhood stuff. Like, you all probably saw me writing. Like, that's my takeaway from this. What can I incorporate from my childhood? Like, because that's me. You might follow me on socials and be like, he talks about marketing and he talks about sports. Yeah, how do I dig deeper to that? Where did the sports part come from?
Yes.
All that type of stuff. So that's one key takeaway for me, and I'm your faithful moderator. But to keep it here, just grounding people again. How do they? What's that core starting point? And I'm gonna list 3 things that I have in a teaching deck or a speaking deck. When it's to identify your personal brand, where do you start? And I always break it down to 3 points: your personality, then consistency in that personality or those posting, and then what's the expertise you have. So what can you bring that's either different, or how can you contribute to that conversation? But I want to throw it to both of you. I'll start with Brianne. What are those things people should define to then start building up and latching on to, this is important to me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, personality is definitely a huge part of it. I think your personality is what's going to set you apart. You could have the same background or credentials or work experience as someone, but if you portray who you are online in a way that people can identify with and understand, oh, this sounds like a fun person to work with, or they seem like they know what they're talking about, or I like their perspective that they wrote about in this article and blog post. They're able to get more of a 360 view of your personality. So they're more likely to call you, they're more likely to hire you, and they're more likely to enjoy working with you. So once you really define your personality, and again, that comes from reflection, and also like Tod and Don were saying, thinking about those other perspectives. Ask people, ask your best friends and family to describe you. There is a great book by an author that I love called named Sally Hogshead, and the book is called How the World Sees You. And that's exactly what it's all about, is how, these other personality tests tell how you see the world, but this book and her personality exercises really help you define how people see you. So once you define all that, it really just comes down to publishing and amplifying your personalities to the point where it's not just your inner circle and friends and family who see it and know who you are. Strangers that you've never met on the internet now know who you are. I always joke that I feel like I'm becoming best friends with people on Twitter that I've never met, especially in 2020, but people won't know the magic of both your personality and your expertise and knowledge unless you get out there and publish it. So whether that's starting with a Twitter account just to get comfortable, or going and doing a full-fledged personal website and blogging or publishing in other media outlets, it just starts with shipping the work and getting seen and amplifying the things that you're doing.
And I would also encourage you to be consistent with that personal brand. A question that I often receive is, well, I have these various side gigs, I'm a consultant by day, but I'm doing this by night. How should I develop my personal brand? Or I have individuals who tell me, I'm not really certain what my passion is. So how do I develop my personal brand? And in many instances, if after you have done self-reflection and you're still not quite certain what to do, it is really important to start thinking about external perspectives and asking others what they might need and how you might be able to contribute to those needs. I would suggest that that is especially important in this current pandemic. In such a competitive job market, we might have a great passion and know what it is that we want to do, but those opportunities just simply might not exist at the moment. But it's just at the moment, this is just temporary. We will work through this pandemic. You will use this time to develop the personal brand and what you want to represent now, so that as we get, through the pandemic and to the other side of it, you're able to take advantage of those opportunities. So while you might not be able to secure your dream job tomorrow, you can certainly start doing things that take advantage of the current market conditions. So think about where the needs are and how you might be able to best support those needs.
That's excellent. And again, still kind of sticking with the building blocks, if you will. And then I promise we're going to get a little bit more advanced. But if people really want to start this, they got to, know where to start. And I'm seeing a lot of that in the chat as well. Kick it to Brianne first, but just, what's that one question you should ask yourself to kick off your brand? If you're going to start this exercise, what's that one question to kick it off?
Ooh, what would I create if I didn't think people were watching? What do I love so much that I'm going to go this route and create it anyway? And just thinking about my own personal experience, when I first started really getting serious about my personal brand, I thought, okay, I have a marketing background and I'm a instructor at a university. I'm going to portray myself as this marketing educator and be super polished and professional. And that's who I am, because on paper, my resume says I'm an instructor at an accredited university and I need to act a certain way. And it didn't feel like myself. It didn't feel like my own voice. I just felt almost like a fraud. Like I was just putting on this facade and persona as being, more, I guess, not to say academic. I mean, I am an academic, but I didn't want to always feel like I needed to be like a textbook when I talk to people. I wanted it to be my own voice. So that's when I said to myself, you know what? I love pop culture, and this is the lens that I want to talk about this field and this industry through. So I'm just going to do that. And I don't know if anyone else is going to care about 90s pop music or boy bands and things that I love and frame my messaging with, but I'm just going to do it anyway. And maybe I'll find an audience doing that, but I know I'm going to have a lot more fun and it's going to feel true to me. So just create what feels right to you first. Don't feel like you have to conform to what personal branding is molding you to be. It's personal to you. It's always going to be what feels best in your heart, if you will.
And the second question that I would ask is where I can make a difference. I know that I have these talents, and where can I use these talents? And it might not always be where we expected them to be. My career started in media services. I started working at Discovery Channel. And although perhaps I knew in the future that I would teach, it certainly was not experience that I expected would lead me to become a professor of marketing at College of William and Mary. But I believed in myself. I believed in my passion for marketing. And so it was, okay, where do opportunities exist to pursue that passion? And I will share with you, when I graduated, I had earned my MBA from Columbia. And instead of joining Wall Street, I joined Discovery Channel. I was earning so little that they wouldn't even place me on their career placement reports because I was bringing down the Columbia MBA average. But I knew in my heart of hearts that if I gained the experience at Discovery Channel, even though I was being paid less than my colleagues, that I would eventually be able to use that experience to continue to build my personal brand so that I could bring it to other industries, whether that be consulting services or higher education. But I will also encourage you that as you develop this personal brand, as I have mentioned before about consistency, with your very first steps, I liked Brianne's comment before about how she's on Twitter and she feels as though people know her on Twitter. I felt like I knew Brianne. This is the first time that we've personally met, just from that beautiful smile of hers and that engaging presence, from the images that she uses on her social media. So something that we haven't talked about yet that I think is so critical is that we are visual beings. I love the fact that I can see so many of you through Zoom. This would be very different if we were just doing an audio podcast, but please be certain to use consistent and professional images. There is no greater compliment that you could give me when I'm at a conference and people walk up to me and immediately know who I am because I look like I do on my LinkedIn profile. So even though I started the day with wearing my hair down, for the record, I pulled it back for this podcast so that when you see me on LinkedIn profile, you'll be like, okay, yes, that is who I need to connect with. So again, it doesn't need to be that you're creating this grand mantra overnight, because this is a long process, but there are a few things that you can do as you get started that will really help you develop a very solid and effective brand. And the importance of visuals cannot be overstated.
Yeah, I love that point there about the consistency in visuals. Same thing. You're going to see my standard headshot that's on my Aflac badge, that's on my LinkedIn, that's on my Twitter, that's on, maybe Instagram slightly different, but and that's, probably where I post the least outside of Facebook. And I want to put a pin in Facebook. There was a good question that came up while we're kind of on platforms, but people are always like, man, it's the same, that same smiling back shirt and tie headshot. And I said, it's about consistency. People want to jump on a Zoom call and connect and be like, this is the face that I saw on LinkedIn, or this is the face that I see tweeting about the national championship game last night, or jumping on Pop Chat and talking about your favorite pop culture dog like last night. Like you have to be intentional about it, and it will pay off. It's playing that long game.
Yeah.
I mentioned.
One more
go ahead.
thing. I would just add to that, as Dawn brought up, and both of you brought up personal brand photos and things like that. It also really holds you accountable for authenticity. I think a lot of times when we think about professional headshots, we picture us standing there with a blazer on and this like yearbook style background. And I almost went through with that when I got my photos done, because I thought that's what I'm supposed to do. That's a professional headshot. But I don't know if you guys have seen some of mine, but those Tiger Beat magazines I told you about a moment ago from my childhood that I grew up loving, that molded me into who I am today, those are in my photos. So think about those things that are just part of your personality. Here's my Clueless pen that I love from the movie Clueless from the 90s. This is in some of my photos. So don't conform to an image that you think you're supposed to be. If you think about what you inherently love, it's going to feel more authentic, and that should also come across in your photos too. That's a great point.
Love that. So I mentioned Facebook. There was a question that came in the queue a little bit ago. Sorry that I cannot attribute it. Can't multitask and scroll back and see who it was from. But it brought up the question in my mind around platforms. And what the question essentially said was, I keep Facebook kind of private. It's just to friends, but I'm public on LinkedIn and I'm public here. Do you need to be public everywhere, or is it okay to mix and match? And I have my thoughts there, but I'm going to let you each go first and weigh in. We'll start with Brianne again, but your thoughts on which platforms, why, what platform? And I think that's the crux too of building this, your brand. Where am I crafting it? And before you start, real quick, it's what I teach in my classes, and I actually have to say at Aflac in meetings every day, we don't have to be on every platform all the time, but be intentional about the places that you are at. So with that, I'll kick it to Brianne about what platforms where.
Yeah, I really don't think there's a perfect answer. I think it comes from experimentation. For me, I thought Instagram was going to be my platform, but I really found my groove, I think, on Twitter. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with going all in on Twitter and maybe keeping Instagram for more personal moments and closing off my Facebook so it is just private. But as far as Facebook specifically, I think there's a big opportunity there for groups. So maybe there's something that you're passionate about. Maybe you want to start a running group or a writers group, or there's I don't know, healthy recipes, you want to start a group for that and bring people together. That's a great place to have that two-way communication and create that community. So that's what I would recommend as far as Facebook. But everything else, I really think it's about trial and error, and you'll hear it. You'll hear where your message is resonating most. And for me, I just felt like I don't really have anything interesting to show people on Instagram. I'm not great at photography. I could take a bunch of pop culture photos from the past and post them up there, but I'm probably going to deal with copyright and things like that. But I just felt like I like sharing thoughts and things that I'm thinking just in real time. So Twitter became my platform. But maybe you're more into visuals. You have maybe you're an artist, you have a craft or something that you want to show people more often. You have more of a visual side of things. Maybe Instagram is the way to go, but you'll see what messages hit and how they're landing, and that will inform where you end up staying and really going full throttle.
Yes, the first question you need to ask is, where is your audience?
Mhm.
Because if you are not communicating with folks who are on Twitter, do not be on Twitter. But if Brianne was not on Twitter, she wouldn't have realized that this is where my audience, this is where I resonate, this is where I can share my values. So do not make assumptions either on how your audiences want to communicate with you. That's such an important lesson that I have learned in my 30 plus years now as a marketer. No assumptions. You need to ask, you need to engage, and Facebook can be very powerful for developing a community. Again, I wholeheartedly agree with Brianne's comments about that. LinkedIn groups are just not as effective. I wish they were, because LinkedIn is my power tool, but they are just not simply as effective. Whereas developing communities across Facebook can be very, very effective. Now, I noticed that I have some wonderful colleagues here as well. Dawn Dreyer from University of Maryland Global Campus is here. Courtney Baum's here from St. Vincent College. I am so thrilled that you are all here. Let me make that the exception to that on LinkedIn groups are colleges and institutions. So if you have major organizations, especially educational institutions, seem to do really well on LinkedIn, seem to truly be able to build those alumni connections. But again, if you're looking to develop sense of community, Facebook is often still the most powerful tool, for better or worse, relative to developing that network. But you need to think about, again, where your audiences are. If you are visual, if you're a photographer, if you're an artist, you really need to be on Instagram. If you're a chef, you might want to be on Pinterest so you can share your recipes and the delicious, creations that you have made. So think about your audience first and foremost, and don't try and be everything to everybody. I started with Twitter, but similar to Brianne, I quickly learned that where people really wanted to connect with me, it seemed, was on LinkedIn. Because on LinkedIn, as an educator, I could share resources. I'm a marketing professor, business professor, so it was just a natural for the audiences with whom I communicate.
Great point there, Dawn, of just you can't be everywhere all the time. And we're pulled in so many different directions already. And so when it comes to your brand, what are those one or two channels, or just one, where that's where your audience is? And this is another call full of marketers and communicators. And what's the essence of what you're marketing or where you're branding? Who are your persona? Who are your consumers? Who are they and how do we market to them? Same thing with a brand. Who are my people and where are my people? And then find that jam. It could be LinkedIn for one person like Dawn. It could be Twitter like Brianne and myself, but find it and own that. Find your tribe. I've used that before. Like, where's your tribe? Who's vibing on the same things that I want to talk about, and stick with it. And then that will develop.
And I noticed, Tod, that there are several questions now on, do you combine your personal brand and your professional brand? And this is a question, again, that I constantly receive. And I would share that how I answered that question perhaps a decade ago has somewhat evolved to how I answer it now, because individuals would potentially have a harder time learning about you as a person 10 years ago than they would have learning about you now. So in all honesty, it's difficult to separate that personal and professional. And I don't even know that you should want to. We live in a gig economy. We live where individuals have a multitude of talents and can share a multitude of talents. So you shouldn't feel as though you need to hide who you are. Individuals might want to hire you just because of who you are as a person, because they believe that that brings that creativity and that innovation to your professional experiences. So I truly am about being authentic to your brand. And while I understand you may have different sites perhaps for your professional associations, you want to build a brand that can really resonate across all of your affiliations.
I'm glad you answered that. That was coming through about 3 or 4 times. I'll let you finish there, Brianne. Just real quick, it's what you said. I always just say it bluntly. Should I separate them or combine them? And I always just say, you are who you are. So it's all one thing to me.
Yeah.
To me, there isn't left hand or right hand. It's Tod. It's sitting in this chair. Again, I'm on Twitter and I'm the sports guy and I'm the marketing guy and I work at like that's me. And you need to get it. You need to get it everywhere. Go ahead, Brianne.
Yeah, I feel that so much because when I started, like I said, getting serious about my personal brand, I had a blog that was just dedicated to pop culture, and then I had a consulting website that was just marketing, and I just felt like 2 different extensions of myself. And I said, okay, well, I need a cute business name for my marketing stuff, and I need a cute name for my blog. And I'm like, you know what? It's just going to be briannefleming.com. And this is who I am. Like you said, Tod, you are what you are. But as far as combining kind of your personal and professional, that was the epiphany I had, was that that's going to be my biggest differentiator. I don't just talk about marketing. I talk about marketing, but also through the lens of pop culture, 2 things that I love. Will that always work perfectly for everyone? Probably not. But what I would recommend is take that broad thing that you love, whether it's marketing or technology or fashion, and layer it down a bit more, drill down another step or 2. So for me, I like marketing, but through the lens of pop culture, more specifically 90s, early 2000s, that's really my jam. But if maybe you like fashion, like I mentioned before, fashion is way too broad. Maybe you specifically cover 80s fashion trends that are coming back, or travel. That's way too broad. Maybe your platform or your blog and your brand is about wineries you should visit if you love travel and wine, or it's only about museums that you must visit, rather than just broadly focusing on travel. So think about, what is that broad thing that you like, but how can you drill it down a little bit more? One more example on that, a friend of mine, Michelle, she's a data scientist by day, but by night and day and morning, she is a runner at heart. And we decided that it might be best for her to talk about data behind running and different tools you can use to become a better runner, and how to read the metrics and how to really track your progress over time. So for her, she did combine, but if combining them doesn't work perfectly, at least just find another layer to what you love.
I think just one quick anecdote here. I think 2020 stripped a lot of the separation away.
Yeah.
We all did this. We all were on Zoom calls. We have kids going in and out, animals in and out. We all stripped that away and we became much more human, and not just Tod, who would badge in at Columbus, Georgia every day and go to the marketing department, and then Steve, who would badge in at Aflac and he'd work at IT. That's kind of how the old model used to work. And, we all want to return to some sense of normalcy. I'd like to mix home and office, but I think we all got more comfortable with saying, this is me. I may show up and work at Aflac every day, but I'm not just Tod who works at Aflac. I do this on the side and I like this. And you're Brianne and I may be an adjunct, but dang, do I love 90s and early 2000s pop culture. And I'm going to bend your ear and talk about it. The same thing goes for Dawn and her passions. It's okay to blend those 2, because again, you are you and this is me and this is what you're going to get.
Be human.
In fact, at William & Mary, in our online MBA program, the first course that we now teach is called Renaissance Manager. And this concept of being a Renaissance leader is that you're bringing all of these different aspects of your life and creating something new and wonderful with them. And we need to own that.
Awesome. Couple more questions here. We have about 15 minutes or so left. Another kind of starting point, or that, what makes you you, so I'll kick it to Brianne first. How do you formulate that message? Dawn has mentioned, the perfect pitch. What's your one sentence or two sentences that, communicate your brand essence? How does someone formulate that?
Yeah, I think it's about remembering that your brand voice is just your voice,
Yep.
especially when it comes to personal branding. I mean, corporations and companies, that is a whole other thing you have to define. But if you really want to be truly authentic, don't filter yourself down. Just talk the same way you would to your best friend. And I really had a light bulb moment when I realized that people on Twitter are occasionally sending me the same memes that my best friend sent to me like 20 minutes ago. So that's how I really knew that I am portraying the same person I am to my best friend as I am online. And it took me a while to get there, but just remember your brand voice is just your natural voice and who you are. Don't filter it down or try to sound smarter because you feel like, oh, I need to brush this up and it's my personal brand needs to also be professional. Just be you and just write like you talk. That's always helped me.
And I noticed one of my former students from St. Vincent, whom I adore, and is also a WVU IMC graduate, Jessica Ray, had posted a question to Brianne's point about how should I transition my brand when I'm transitioning companies. And I would state that you're not transitioning your brand, you're bringing it with you. And developing, and Jessica in particular, I know the power of her brand and the values that she brings wherever she goes. And so you should be thinking about that even before you're transitioning companies. In fact, Sachi and Sachi had delivered a guest lecture in my class a few years ago and said that this generation will have between 16 and 32 different jobs during the course of your career. So those are going to be plenty of transitions. And I wouldn't want you changing your brand every time you were changing a job. So think about it as though you're bringing your value with you. Now, that brand will develop, that brand will evolve. In fact, I will share with you a little secret that my first brand promise was that I teach people how to pursue and promote their passions. But I learned after a decade of sharing that brand promise that people actually were really concerned that if they didn't know their passion, could I help them? So I've since changed it to focus on the value that you bring to others, not just for those of us who know what our passions are and want to pursue them.
Just jotting down some more great notes. I hope you all are as well. Before we close, I got a couple more here, but let's slightly switch gears. Let's talk about personal brands that you like, that you follow, that you would recommend folks on this call, on this meeting, on this seminar, if you will. Who are some good personal brands? And it can, broad spectrum. I will let you all both decide. I'll start with Brianne again, but who are some brands that you gravitate towards, follow, like, what have you?
Yeah, just some Twitter friends, people who I know that, like I said, have added that second layer. If you guys aren't following Alexa Heinrich, I think her handle is hashtag Hey Alexa. I could put it in here, but she is a marketer, but she added that second layer by talking about accessibility in marketing and how to make sure our communications are more accessible for screen readers and things like that. So she's done a great job with that. I love following her and seeing her really own that niche because no one else is talking about that. There are some other people I follow on Twitter that use color really well. Just simply defining a color that is what you're known for is a huge signal in defining your personal brand. So Christine Gritman on Twitter, she is always in red. Red is everywhere. Or Jake Zachariah is always in yellow ochre. He loves Bob Ross, and that's part of his brand. But you compare these things to people like Prince, who always had purple. It's so subtle, but you can own a color as well. So think about just that as a step in defining your brand is how do I want to also illustrate who I am with my photography, the colors that I use, and the tone of all of my images. So we see celebrities do it, but anyone can do it. Thanks for dropping those handles in there, Agassi. I appreciate it.
And let me pivot that question slightly to talk about what you can do, in particular in LinkedIn, to ensure that the right people start to follow you or be recommended to you. So in the case of LinkedIn, it's so important. The power of keywords is critical. So if you have developed your profile, well done. If you've developed your profile with a personalized URL, even better. But make certain that when you're developing your profile that you are using keywords again, not necessarily of what you've done in the past, but perhaps who you want to be in the future. And LinkedIn has become a very powerful tool during the past several years. I do not know if you are aware, but this little organization called Microsoft bought them. And because of that, they've become much more robust. Of course, the more robust, the more you use it, the more value it has to you, the more ad sales that they can sell. So that's the marketer me understanding the value, their value proposition. But that's a very powerful tool for you as well. You will get recommendations, you will get career recommendations, you will get individuals who you can follow recommendations. So using those keywords and fully developing your profile is really important to being able to connect you to the right people.
Thanks for those anecdotes. And when I was saying, brands you like, we were talking Twitter, we were talking Instagram, we talk LinkedIn. Again, where are your people? Where are your tribes? How are you on those platforms? How do you optimize? How do you connect? The one that springs to mind for me, before we get to our last question and wrap this up, is Ryan Reynolds right now. He's an actor and he's funny, yet that's him. And then he's incorporated himself as now a genius marketer and running a marketing shop that then can market him, but market his products. And then they do it seamlessly. Oh, but then what maybe won't be so seamless, because then he kind of calls it out in his ads of, wait, am I is my movie on this ad for Samsung, or is this now a aviation gin ad? Which is it? But then it seems natural because he's funny and he's relatable, and it doesn't come off as him selling, even though he is. And a lot of people on this call probably see through it and yet still watch it and still buy his products and still laugh, because his brand, that's him. He's an actor, he's a marketer, he's an entrepreneur, and it's all just him. There's no separation of church and state there, for lack of a better or bad analogy. And I point my students his direction a lot. They know him, they may know him as an actor, but I'm like, have you followed his, you follow his Twitter? Do you follow he and his wife on Instagram? Do you follow his other brands? It's him. So that's kind of my example of, if you want to just be you, kind of follow that mold. Are our students and the folks on this call, are we actors and whatever else? No, but you can be you. And Ryan he's just him.
Yeah, I highly recommend listening to his interview that he did with Adweek. I think it was during Brand Week. If you guys can Google it, I don't know if it's still available, but he really just talked about how he does what he does. He's just brilliant.
One last question here before we wrap this up, and it's going to be that jump off point. So everybody's about ready to log off. We're going to grab a bite to eat. We're going to go on, but we're going to have branding on our brain, personal branding. So I'll start with Brianne again, but what's the steps that someone can take to build their brand as they leave this call today? What's their jump in point when they leave this call to say, man, they fired me up, I'm ready to go do it?
Start publishing on whatever platform you want to start with. Start on social, but I always encourage everyone I talk to, my students especially, that you need a personal website. We all need our own little corner of the internet that we own and is our place. I know a lot of people start when they're into blogging, they write on a site called Medium, which you might be familiar with, which is great. I did that in the beginning before I got my website up, but you're still renting space on borrowed land, if you will, on other sites. And specifically to Medium, when someone reads your article, they're going to get served another article that's similar by someone else that wrote something. So you're merely an afterthought in a matter of seconds once they're done reading your article. You really want to direct people to your content, to engage with everything you've written, to read your related post versus a related post about someone else. And that way, in the future, if you have something to sell, if you start a business, whatever it may be, you've created an audience that knows you, doesn't just know Medium, and you're able to collect email addresses and really build an audience that's yours and is your community. So start on social, start wherever you need to, but really, if you don't have one yet, set a goal for that personal website. Wix, Squarespace, WordPress, there's so many tools where anyone can do it now, even if you don't have coding experience. You really don't need it, but you will never regret having your own piece of the internet that's truly yours.
And I would leave you with a reminder that you are worth the investment. You need to invest in yourself, even if it is just 10 minutes a week, to build your brand. I actually have on my LinkedIn profile, I do not develop many LinkedIn articles, but I did develop an article on how LinkedIn found me my dream job at William & Mary when I was not even looking. So if you happen to need hope in your life, I hope that this is a story of hope that I can share with you. But I also developed, once I was at William & Mary, and individuals started to hear my story there and learn about my brand. Our faculty asked, what can we do? We do not have time to develop our own website or to do this or to do that. And I said, 10 minutes a week. Just spend 10 minutes a week connecting and engaging with others. Be intentional about what you do and how you do it. And keep in mind that it's not enough to simply build a brand, but you need to live your brand, and then you need to share that brand with others.
Those are excellent parting points of wisdom. Just do want to echo, what Brianne said. If own that space. We've been talking about being you and owning it. If you don't own yourname.com, go get it. Go look into it and invest in it. It may cost money. You may have a very, very common name. Then what is that brand essence that you can make your own? Because all of these places could cease to exist very soon, social platforms and whatever else. But your writing can live on yourname.com. When your writing can live, if maybe again LinkedIn is your place and you're connecting and you're on the move, have your stuff can live there. But look into yourname.com. And I'm saying that because I don't know everybody's name on here, but go own that URL.
Very first things that I did. And I owned it for 2 years before I did anything with it. Mm-hmm. And it's not as updated as it should be since I've transitioned to LinkedIn, but it is the first own your real estate. So do a quick search. If you're asking Tod what you can do immediately after this call, do a Google search on a computer that does not know you. If you want to know how the world perceives you, do a Google search on a computer that does not know you, and hopefully you will own all of the real estate that appears on that first Google search page. If you need to track it, brandyourself.com is a free tool that you can use. It will provide you with updates as to whether or not there's a change on that first Google search relative to your name. That's brandyourself.com. And another great resource to track your brand and where it's mentioned is mention.com.
I have one more thing that I want to add, Dawn. You mentioned that this is an investment in yourself. I think if anything, remember that building your personal brand could also be a safety net. We've seen just how unpredictable this past year has been, and you don't want, circumstances to change, and maybe you're on the job hunt and you have nothing to really show for it. So build out your portfolio, start demonstrating your expertise. That way, if you ever need a plan B, you've established yourself online and you're good to go.
Awesome. Well, we are at time, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Obviously, special thanks to Dawn Edmiston and Brianne Fleming for your time today. Thank you so very much. This was really fun and really great. Please feel free, as we said in the beginning and Dawn stressed, reach out to us on LinkedIn with any follow-ups, but personalize it. Send us a note. Show us that you're taking that extra step. You're going that extra layer to develop those connections. So we'd love to connect. You can find us if you Google us as well. We've done our best to own that real estate. As we said, we're practicing what we preach. And also be sure to visit integrate.wvu.edu for other upcoming sessions, recordings of previous episodes, and to subscribe to receive updates. A recording of this call will be sent out. Again, we will do our best to connect with y'all after this. I know we covered a lot. Thanks again, Dawn. Thanks again, Brianne. And thanks again, everybody, for joining, and have yourself a wonderful day.
Thank you. I just want to also thank Alexis Rogers for putting me in touch with WVU. This was a pleasure. And yeah, everyone feel free, add me on LinkedIn, Twitter. I'd love to connect with you all. Thank you guys so much for this opportunity. Tod, Dawn, you both were great. Thank you.